So delighted to be here with the people on this panel, with many of the people in the audience, everyone in the audience, but some of the people in the audience who are not typically in this room. My name is Michael Kennedy, and I would like to welcome you all here. Good afternoon. Dzień dobry państwu. We, in the Joukowsky Forum today, are perhaps more Polish than the Joukowsky Forum has ever been, at least in recent memory. And that makes me very happy. We are most fortunate to have with us Polish colleagues who have thought deeply about and carefully researched what is arguably the greatest social movement of the 20th century, Solidarność, or Solidarity. Their book, Solidarity Step by Step, is not a history of the movement, however. It is rather an invitation to understand and to live that solidarity with a small s in these times, but in a way that is informed by a sustained engagement with witnesses and documents from the time of that great movement. Michał Łuczewski, together with Mikołaj Achemczyk, Piotr Czekierda, Małgorzata Falkowska-Warska, Michał Gawrylow, Paweł Łączkowski, and Maria Szymborska wrote Solidarity Step by Step, a book available in both English and in Polish. Michał and Karol Wasilewski have also turned their sixth step, to forgive in truth, into a film entitled The Father, the Son, and the Friend. You all are extremely fortunate to be able to see that film, a version of that film today at least, as well as to hear these terrific intellectuals and artists, many of whom, by the way, are sociologists, which is a good thing. This session is entitled Globalizing Solidarity, Step by Step. To be sure, this project was originally conceived for a Polish audience, but even while it never loses its Polish grounding, its message and invitation are far more universal than it is national. But for a project to be more than a projection, it must have an audience prepared to engage. And that is why when I met these colleagues in Brussels last spring and enjoyed the European discussion, I thought, you know, this discussion might be even better at Brown. And that is my hypothesis that I hope you prove true today. American solidarity with Poland, with Europe, with the world is one of the most important things we could imagine, but it can only grow step by step. Of course, every scholarly project, every extension of solidarity depends on the generosity of spirit I find so deep in this assembly of scholars and creators, not all of whom can be with us today. In particular, I wish to mark the work of Monika Bartoszewicz of the Center for the Thought of John Paul II for all she has done to enable solidarity step by step. I also wish to thank all those of that wonderful center for supporting this terrific project. I want to thank, of course, those units that have made this immediate visit possible, not least of which is the Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, but as well the Kościuszko Foundation, whose president is unfortunately involved with Poland's president today, and he sends his greetings to you.
The president.
John Mietzkiel. Well, President Duda too, perhaps. You will know better. And as well, we should also thank the Fetzer Institute for enabling this project and enabling this visit. There is reason why I think this Polish exploration has a potential global resonance like few other such endeavors. In part, this is because they can build on a Polish expression that is now just shy of 200 years old. For your freedom and ours. Za wolność naszą I waszą. We could refashion that phrase today in light of the discussion I anticipate, and make it rather za solidarność waszą I naszą. However, I think we need to revise that even further. For I just said, for solidarity, yours and ours. It might be better said, za solidarność naszą, where our extends beyond our nation, our political unit. For that is a promise embedded in the most virtuous notions of solidarity itself. I am most grateful to all my Polish colleagues, but especially to those in this room, for reminding me of the greatest virtues of solidarity. So now, please help me welcome everyone who is about to speak, but in particular, Michał Łuczewski, who will kick us off. So.
I'm very thankful that I can be with you today, in particular to you, that you made it happen. That was a gift of Michael that we came here, but we magnified that gift. We made a tour in America from Chicago to South Bend to Lafayette with the message of solidarity. And as Pope Francis toured America with the message of solidarity, so did we. When Michael Kennedy visited Poland in 1983, it was a far country for him. But it was the time when I was born, and from that perspective, it is also a far country for me. I came from a family that was communist family. My grandma was in the communist government. My father had to work since he was 21 because of me, and he started working during the martial law that crushed Solidarity movement. In prison. He was an accountant, but he had to work, and he worked for the communist regime, one could say. And when he saw a friend of high school who was arrested, and then he told me that it was one of the most painful views in his life, then it told me something that my family was something of being unusual. And I wanted to see what were other families, what was the experience of solidarity. So I'm coming back to that distant far country of solidarity from the 80s. And what I see there and what I discover there, these are 5 things that are important for me. First of all, this is a magnitude of that movement. 10 million people, 1/3 of the population that was engaged in the movement, in the social movement that is non-violent against the dictatorship. And when I'm thinking about it, it's blowing my mind to see 10 million people united by one cause. So the magnitude, then also the language. That was a distant country for me also in that respect, that the language they used was completely different than the language that we are using. It was not the language of rights, it was not the language of individualism, of interest, but it was language of conscience, of ethos, of solidarity, of dialogue, of forgiveness, of love. So that was completely different language that transformed that reality, and that was a surprise for me, I have to say, to see how much different that country was. And also solidarity, this is the third point, opened up the past. The Polish past was very hard past. That was the past full of battles lost. And then solidarity came, and all those failures of the past could be overcome. So that it shows that solidarity, that past is never finished. We can always open up the past, and we can always make up for the failures of our fathers. And so was the future opened. There was a horizon of new hopes that were before such a movement. And last but not least, that movement was a humane movement. It was movement with many leaders and it was those leaders who were able to create new language and to create new world. So these are 5 points that I discovered for myself, but then I discovered one more thing, that treasure, that magnitude, that humanity, that new language, past and future, they were lost. After 1989 with liberal reforms, and this is very well described by Michael, with liberal reforms, all that belonged to the past was lost. Let me finish with one of my interviewees who, during the martial law, when my father was working in prison, he was arrested. And he was tortured. There was bad policemen and then even worse policemen who were torturing him. He lost also a friend of his who either committed suicide or was made commit suicide by the secret police. And when I've heard that message from him, it also changed my vision of what I should do. One of my colleagues once told me that when communism was finally finished, it would be enough for him to join one march from Parade Square through the whole of Warsaw. But we never marched. We are not given that satisfaction. We did not feel victory. Nobody wanted us. We were useless. This is normal. It is always like that. When things are bad, the toughest ones remain on the square. But when freedom dawns, true characters are revealed. Some sought power, while others looked for other benefits. But that was a long time ago. There is no need to worry about it. Over the years, it was possible to reflect over each of these problems. But we did not march then, and we never will. So when I heard that from him, I decided that maybe there won't be there won't be a march, there won't be anything big, but what can I do is just to make several steps, and therefore we decided to discover the treasure of solidarity. We organized a project. We will be presenting to you. We showed that project already in Brussels, in Ukraine, in Spain. And it's high time for the US, and maybe there will be time for Poland because we are thinking about the right time to go there. So now we are checking out all the possible countries, but for Poland. And so we organized that project. We had a wonderful team who was of very versatile background, political, but also professional. There's Karol Wasilewski, who is a film director, Maria Szymborska, who is a sociologist, which is important because I'm a sociologist as well. There's Piotr Czekierda, who is an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur. He produces, among other things, he produces hard cider. So this is this is the guy to talk to.
It helps sometimes to be more solidaric.
and Mikołaj Achremczyk, who is a medical doctor. So we collected a very versatile group, not all of them can be here, to rediscover that language and to continue that march step by step. So please show what is the most important part of that project for you.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you. And indeed, I run several projects, and business one and social one, and I have to ask my wife, may I join the project that Michał introduced to myself? We have 3 children, the 4th is on the way, so it's an important question. And my wife said, yes, do it for Poland. And I never have an idea that I will do it for Poland, and even more, I will do it for US. So, so I'm great to be here and share with you the treasure of solidarity. During the work on in this project, because the aim was to publish a book which will be a real book, something real to read and something real to think, and maybe some guide to take some actions on solidarity. And during this work, that was exciting for me to find a real roots or values which solidarity was based on. And we look on it in historical way. We just saw some documentary film maybe not more than film, just relations, that the story about how workers work with communists or making some compromise during this hot August in 1918. And we also read some classical texts from ideologies of solidarity. And for me, we found a few treasures and the roots of solidarity. That was fate. Maybe you will be surprised seeing the pictures from this workers' strike. There was portrait of John Paul II. That was the picture of Virgin Mary. That was a cue for to have a confession during the strike, Holy Mass in the center of a shipyard. So I think it was a bit different than strikes in France, for instance, or other European countries. The second thing was the nation and the remembrance of our tradition of military uprising. I was really surprised seeing how very important for these people making this solidarity with big S was the remembrance about Warsaw uprising in 1944. It's something different than Jewish uprising. When not few, but many Warsaw people stand against German with few military arms and with few ammunition, and this uprising gave us freedom, of course, but the cost was huge. The cost was huge, and for them, the remembrance about nation and about these victims were very important to make it on a peaceful way, So nation, I think nation and the remembrance about nation was the second idea, and I think what was important also is the support of a big something big, a VIP, we can say, and in those times the support from this authority was John Paul II. So he's a religious, but also not only the religious person, but the political leader looking for a common good. And his support, maybe not very strictly, was I think also crucial for the success of this solidarity. And going to the second thing important, during the work on this book, we found that not for every of our team those values, faith, nation, and some authority is the same precious, we can say. In modern science, those values by part of our group were founded as oppressive a bit. So that was a very interesting discussion, how it is indeed is other really values who can help to build something which is extraordinary or not. So I would like to leave you with that question, and we'll be happy to have a good discussion after film or be that first part. So thank you very much.
So now time for sociologist or medical doctor. You have to decide.
So I would like to add, also very honored to be here with you today. I would like to add just one more value that Piotr didn't talk about. I would say, like, what touched me the most during the lectures we've heard, during the meetings with the witnesses, was the fact that some of them said that we cannot think about that time, like between 70s and 80s, as the time of real terror. And I would also want to ask you not to think about that time as something like terrific, unbearable system that we could not live under, like something that evil and good were obvious. I like the metaphor that someone used, that it was rather kind of a swamp, or even someone said swampy, that it wasn't really obvious what was good, what was bad. It's really neat, and that's the value I would like to tell you about. It's the value of conscience and the value of self-work. Like, I was really touched by the fact that so many people were just prepared somehow to stand up. Like those 10 million people, they were somehow prepared. So that's very important, and maybe that's the platform we somehow can meet on when we are not all agreed with the values that Piotr told you about. It's that just the platform of working on ourselves and the value of self-education all the time, and that's something that touched me the most. That there were so many. That's also something that brings us to today's day. That it's something that brings us to the future, present and the future. That we can still work on ourselves, and that's something that's, in my opinion, it's very important. Like in this project and in speaking about solidarity. But I know that Mikołaj has many more expressions about it, so, and good examples.
I think we were really touched by the meetings with Witness of Solidarity, so very ordinary men and women who took part in solidarity movement in their home places, in the cities we visited, but also they visited us in Warsaw. And looking at them, we clearly saw that solidarity had many dimensions. And one very important for me was this personal dimension of solidarity. Through the conscience, which what Maria already mentioned, those people get to know the knowledge about themselves. They were confronted with themselves. They try to define what is good and what is evil within themselves. And this struggle and this decision to define what is good and what is bad made them humans somehow, or developed them. And that was the case for the people who believed. They took it somehow from their beliefs, from Christianity, that was most common in Poland, but also for the people who didn't believe. And those people, like Jacek Kuroń, for example, left intellectual, they confronting the evil which they saw. That was an evil, in the Kuroń case, of the Polish communists, Jewish communists who were expelled from the party because who really were like devoted to communism, but the communist ideology didn't accepted them. That was the case when he, for example, experienced evil in the system in which he believed. And this evil was present not only there, but he just looking at the reality, he saw the evil in many dimensions in Poland, social injustice, people who work really hard with a very low pay for the work, the injustice which was connected with the lack of truth. The absolute lack of truth about history, about many people told us there were two truths, one in house, and one at school, at university. You couldn't say the same thing in your house and in the university, and that was a reality. And so those people, through their conscience, they could respond to reality and to the evil in this reality. And I think that is the first step to solidarity, that you try to see evil in the reality, however you see this, or it's a guy who is in prison because he had the courage to tell the truth, or it's a woman who works hard with the night shifts and has no time for children, and the party says, oh, you're happy to have a work and this will make you a better person, but in case she's very tired and gets nothing from this. And this was very well described in Havel book, so maybe you can come back to this. That was The Power of Powerless. Maybe you know this, when he very well depicted the gap between reality and ideology in communist times. So the reality was an injustice in many dimensions, and the ideology and the governance based on this ideology didn't show this injustice. So there were real problems in society, poverty, lack of truth, imprisonment, and government did nothing because the ideology somehow couldn't correspond to this. that was this personal dimension. But when the person started to define what is good and what is evil, those people started to behave in a started to act. And that was also ethical dimension of solidarity, that their actions of the people who were engaged in solidarity showed somehow what is good and what is bad, yes? And also a moral dimension that was an example for the others. Because at the time, what Maria said, it wasn't really, no one really told you what is good and what is bad. People weren't so sure about it. And some people even didn't know what conscience is. I really like, maybe I will read here from this book, because it was very striking for me. And I think it corresponds good to the totalitarianism, but also to the situation at that time, and the role of a conscience for the human beings. It's Adam Michnik, a left intellectual, who writes to a general and who is a minister of inner service in Poland, so very powerful man. And I will maybe read it if you don't mind. Paraphrasing the saying of one of the great writers of our continent, I would like to suggest that the first thing you need to know, General, is what it is to have a human conscience. It may come as news to you that there are two things in the world, evil and good. You may not know that to lie and to insult is not good, that to betray is bad, to imprison and murder is even worse. Never mind that such things might be expedient, they are forbidden. Yes, General, forbidden. Who forbids them? General, you may have the backing of a power that extends from the Elbe to Vladivostok, and of the entire police force of this country. You may have millions of informers and millions of zlotys with which to buy guns, water cannons, bagging devices, servile collaborators, informers, and journalists. But something invisible, a passerby in the darkness, will appear before you and say, "This you must not do. This is conscience." And so it's how solidarity began. It didn't begin with ideas. It's just a clear response to evil. And it began in 1980 when Anna Valentinowicz was dismissed from work. She was just about in her 50s, late 50s, and there were several months which were left to retirement. And because of her engagement in some peaceful movement, he was dismissed from work. And that was when solidarity began, that her workers that worked together with her said, no, we want her to get back to the shipyard because she worked in a Gdańsk shipyard. And this was the moment when solidarity began. It didn't begin with ideas. It didn't begin with big words. It began with clear correspondence to evil. This is one thing. Also wanted to tell you what the witnesses told us about what were the rules of solidarity. So the first was try to build, not to destroy. And the second was fight with the evil, not with a man. That is, the second one is maybe very clear to you. That was the same what Martin Luther King said. It was this active in violence, and that was really practiced within the 16th months of solidarity. In 1918, no one died, so no communist has been shooted, or there was no active violence practiced by those people. Indeed, they were steadily confronted with Secret Service agents, or they were just, this confrontation was sometimes very active from the Secret Service agents. They really wanted them to do something evil or to provoke them for aggression. They didn't. 10 million people didn't use aggression, so that was tremendous. And coming back to this, to build, not to destroy, because the communist system responded to ideology, not to reality, there was a big void in this reality, like the void, the emptiness, which could be somehow used by solidarity. Those people, they made a great work to write statues of student organizations, of working organizations. They just started many organizations or many communities which were not present before 1980. And they didn't know how to make it. They didn't have any special education for this. They were simple workers sometimes. Very often it happened that we met those people and they told us, someone just told me, write a statue of student organization. And I asked, how to make it? And they replied, you will manage. And they managed. Yes, without nothing, without any knowledge, without any education, they managed and it worked, really worked. So, and the thing what also really struck me in Solidarity that they used democracy, like in the workers used democracy, and the democracy was very transparent. So every claim that they stated was built by discussion. And every worker in a working place could say their claim, it was discussed, voted, and then written and then given to the Communist Party. So everyone was included could participate, could say their opinion, and it could be presented to a Communist Party. There was no elite. This democracy was very direct. In 1980, there was a big gathering, Solidarity gathering in Oliva in Gdańsk. There were 900 delegates from all over Poland, one delegate for 10,000 people. And they were direct representatives of 9 million people. They were just voted directly. So that was a miracle of Solidarity. It never happened before and never after. I think never after. Even also when Poland was a free country in democracy, I don't think that 9 million people took part in elections. They didn't. Yes, so that was the only, I think, time in Polish history that so many people took part in democratic elections that were so transparent. Yes, and do we have time? Maybe not. Because I think it may be over.
You might conclude.
Okay.
Then 2 words for Michael.
Okay. And so we also wanted to prepare some steps or some like guides for you how to search for solidarity and how to practice this. And the first thing is to confront the reality. Look, what is nearby you? What are the needs of the people who are nearby you? Go and search for community. Don't stay alone. Individualism is a threat for solidarity. The community enables you to get responsibility, direct responsibility, and also enables you to minimize fear. At the time it was bigger, but now it is also connected with the fear, this social action. And then go towards the people who are different, or go toward the people who live in the poverty, however you understand this, or this is a moral poverty or social poverty or just financial poverty. And I would also say about try to form yourself to transcendent values, however you understand them, but they're essential in the moments when you'll be fed up or in the moments where you will not have power. These transcendent values, however you understand them, are very important to continue solidarity. And that's
So just 2 words before we go to the film. I thought I understood solidarity very well. My dissertation was on solidarity. My first book was on solidarity. There are people in this room who know solidarity, the Polish social movement, better than I, for sure. But I thought I knew it very well. And then, through serendipity and circumstance, I was given the chance to read the manuscript. And in that 48 hours where I couldn't put this down. My sense, not just of that movement, but what that movement's lessons are for the world, rocked my world. I had the opportunity then to go to Brussels to meet everyone here. That double rocked my world. But then, when I saw the film that you were about to see, I couldn't rock anymore. I had to think beyond rock and roll. And I thought about the world in a way that it was connected differently than I ever imagined it connected before. So I am just so grateful that my colleagues are here, that you all will get to see this film that Karol Wasilewski and Michał Łuczewski created. But more, this book transformed me because it was the art of dialogue that I had never seen before. They create dialogue that I don't see before. And I'm looking forward to a dialogue that I think will be unprecedented for even them after this film. So I just want to thank you all, and thank you all for this first part.
Mama w drzwiach mi powiedziała: Agnieszko, tatuś nie żyje.
To, co ja zrobiłem, ja odpowiadam za to, ale dziecko było niewinne.
Byłem ostatnim przewodniczącym Komisji Zakładowej Solidarności w walcowni Zgniatacz.
Proszę siadać. Pan będzie świadkiem w sprawie.
Ale W jakiej sprawie przyjdziecie?
W sprawie o prowadzenie, w sprawie o strajk.
To jest bardzo przygnębiające miejsce, bo 16 zginęło 6 kolegów i te ciała tutaj były ułożone, przykryte takimi prześcieradłami. Jednym z tych 6 był również twój ojciec.
Tu z jednej strony tłum górników, niesamowity, z drugiej strony tłum kobiety, dzieci. W ogóle taki jakiś dzień sądny, tak się nieprzyjemnie już robiło wcześniej. No, ale takie miejsce.
Także masz wspomnienia,
sobie
że
tu
tu
nieraz.
widziałaś ostatni raz ojca żywego.
Tak. Często tu przychodzę z synem. To jedyne, co mi utkwiło w pamięci, to jak tata powiedział do mamy: zabierz ją stąd, niech nie widzi, co tu się będzie działo. Lepiej niech
Czyli
dziecko tego
takie
nie widzi.
prorocze słowa
Takie
gdzieś.
prorocze, jak gdyby przeczuwał, że coś złego się wydarzy.
A próbowałeś go, no szczególnie mama, przekonać, żeby wyszedł
Próbowała, nie dał się przekonać.
Chciał być
Nie
jednak
dał
z
się
kolegami.
przekonać, powiedział, że to jest w tym momencie ważne, że on musi tu być z kolegami razem i żeby to zrozumiała. I wydaje mi się, że zrozumiała. Tylko szkoda, że tak się to skończyło.
Solidarność była najpiękniejszym moim przeżyciem, w jakim brałem udział. To były piękne dni, to było marzenie. Poznałem dwie swoje miłości. Miłość do żony, którą poznałem dzięki Solidarności, i do Solidarności. Dla mnie to było coś tak wspaniałego i ta świadomość, że bierzemy udział w czymś niezwykłym. No było najwspanialsze. Można było wtedy nie spać, nie jeść, cieszyć się, że można coś zrobić dla ludzi, dla ojczyzny. To była nędza, to była głodówka, to nie było co jeść. No i chcieliśmy przewrócić ten świat do góry nogami. Rzeczywiście to potwierdza. Było takie marzenie wygrać z komuną, ale bić się z komuną, no to rzeczywiście wyzwanie nieprawdopodobne. Jak powstała Solidarność, poszliśmy przede wszystkim do kościoła podziękować za to, że jesteśmy, że się organizujemy. Chodziliśmy nawet nie tylko na mszę, ale po prostu przyjść, usiąść w ławce, pomodlić się. Trochę wyrwać się, prawda, z tego świata obok, który nas otaczał, i przyjść, porozmawiać z Panem Bogiem. Refleksja, czy dobrze robię, czy może tego nam zabrakło już właśnie w latach 90. Tak się zachłysnęliśmy, że już mamy wolność, że właściwie, no po co nam teraz Kościół?
Solidarność się narodziła, to pomoc była właśnie tylko dla dzieci Solidarności. Ja się temu sprzeciwiłem później. Mówię, Solidarność ma służyć każdemu jednemu człowiekowi, potrzebującemu. Ja to miałem we krwi tak jakoś, tak, że my sobie nawzajem w ogóle wszyscy pomagać. I to jest właśnie, tu się zaczyna ta Solidarność. Ja po przemianach w 1998 roku postanowiłem, aby na Zgniataczu zostawić ślad, że tutaj była kolebka Solidarności. Tym ludziom, którzy tutaj właśnie ten strajk organizowali, żeby to pamiątka była dla nich, a i dla mnie. Ja nie umiem stanąć w miejscu. Ciągle lubię coś robić. Mnie by krew zalała, no, ja siadł na wersalce, trzeba posiadł na awce i tam gdzieś tam z kolegami pił czy wódkę, które mnie to nie interesowało nigdy.
Ślubne zdjęcie moich rodziców. Bardzo byli młodzi, jak się pobierali. Zresztą to było bardzo szczęśliwe małżeństwo. Uwielbiał trubadurów, tańczył rewelacyjnie i mnie uczył również. Ulubiona piosenka mojego taty, Znamy się tylko z widzenia. Uwielbiał ją. To jest taki chichot historii, że rzeczywiście się znamy tylko z widzenia, bo go pamiętam słabo. Ale najważniejsze, że te wspomnienia są chociaż przyjemne. Te dwa zdjęcia najlepiej opisują jego charakter, że bardzo troszczył się o mnie, ja byłam oczkiem w głowie jego. Chodziliśmy na długie spacery, na sanki, do kina na poranki w niedzielę. Włóczyliśmy się po okolicy. Tata mi opowiadał o drzewach. Lubiłam słuchać. Ja mam takie zdjęcie właśnie, jak rzucam wiązankę kwiatów na trumnę i trzyma mnie wujek, żebym nie wpadła do dołu. No, zima, mróz siarczysty i ślisko było, deski były takie oblodzone. Na początku nie było wiadomo kto, nie były podawane żadne personalia. Wiadomo, władza robiła wszystko, żeby zatuszować sprawę wujka, żeby ukryć, żeby zapomniano. Dopiero w latach 90. pojawiły się zdjęcia, pojawiły się nazwiska. Ja ich nienawidziłam z całego serca i życzyłam im jak najgorzej przez wiele lat. Właśnie za to, że zabili mojego ojca, że zrujnowali mi życie w pewnym sensie.
Boi się pan wyroku? takie ławeczki, pięknie,
tak,
super.
tak.
Takie ławeczki, panie Staszku, to jest
No to
dla naszych podopiecznych tutaj
przydadzą
super
się
się.
bardzo.
Przydadzą
Tak,
się, dobra,
Jeszcze
wypakowujemy
jak
je.
będzie potrzeba, to dorobimy więcej, tylko troszeczkę materiału musimy
No,
zdobyć.
super, dzięki. Będą mieć na czym siedzieć.
Nie? No jest.
Tam brama w miarę, zobaczcie tu, ta się trzyma jakoś. Ale wiesz co, najgorzej to ta,
Chodzi. Aha.
wiesz co, ta furtka
Ale to tak.
wejściowa,
No, ale
No
to tak
zobaczcie.
fatalnie to wygląda. Tu wydaje mi się,
tutaj
że tutaj-
trzeba by było to oskrobać. I wiesz co,
To słuchaj, to pomalujemy to. Jak zdrowie pozwoli, to na wiosnę to zrobimy.
na wiosnę będziemy
No.
działać.
No.
Będziemy działać.
A myślę,
Panie
że,
Staszku.
że Bóg da.
Mało jest takich ludzi jak pan. Powiem szczerze. Mało jest takich ludzi. To znaczy niektórzy, pamiętam, mam takie doświadczenie, że niektórzy to tak raz przyjdą, coś tam zobaczą tych podopiecznych. No i tyle. Dzięki za to wszystko, bo komu jak komu, ale panu się to należy.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Witam. Mam tu swoje zasoby archiwalne.
O, ja też wezmę swoje. To zapraszam tam, może
Jeśli
pójdziemy
można,
do stołu.
To się
To, co
podzielimy
jest u nas, to chodźmy,
swoimi.
zobaczymy. Tutaj mam ciekawe, bo to jest lista postulatów. Zarząd Oddziału NSZZ Solidarność w Żerodowie ustalił żądania w stosunku do władz miejskich i wojewódzkich.
Myśmy to robili na żywioł. Pisaliśmy tak, jak ludzie nam załogi dyktowały, jeśli tak można powiedzieć. No, chcieliśmy rzeczywiście
widać.
poprawić ich los i gdyby tak było, jak to wynikało z naszych postulatów, no żylibyśmy w zupełnie innym świecie, w pięknym świecie, bajkowym świecie, jak się okazuje. Rzeczywistość jest smutna i okrutna. No właśnie, o tą sprawiedliwość chodzi, a jej właściwie nie ma. No i najbardziej denerwuje nas to, że nikt z tych oprawców nie został właściwie osądzony, skazany. Mówią, że człowiekowi powinien wybaczyć, ale ja nie. Za to, co z ludziom zrobili, przecież są Polakami. Ja im nie wybaczę z ludzkiego takiego, nie katolickiego, ale ludzkiego podejścia do sprawy, dlatego że ci ludzie mogli wykonywać swoją pracę również w inny sposób. Oni nie musieli być bandytami, oprawcami, mordercami. I to, że no nawet, bo można byłoby się zastanowić, no ale żeby chociaż próbowali przeprosić.
Ja nie będę mówił długo, dlatego że postanowiliśmy, żeby to zawsze pierwsze słowo i ostatnie w tej sprawie mieli ci ludzie, którzy się będą ujawniać. Mamy nadzieję, że po tym ujawnieniu, o którym Państwo się za chwilę dowiecie, będą następne. Najważniejsze dla nas jest to, żeby ujawnić mechanizmy działania aparatu represji komunistycznej.
Proszę Państwa, to co zrobiłem, Jest to dla mnie wielki ból. Żyłem z tym tyle lat. Było mi bardzo ciężko. Postanowiłem z tym nie żyć i ujawnić to, co zrobiłem. Nazywam się Stanisław Filosek. Byłem ostatnim przewodniczącym Komisji Zakładowej Niezależnego Samorządnego Związku Zawodowego Solidarność w Walcowni Zgniatacz. Odpowiadając na apel, pod którym podpisali się moi koledzy z Hutniczej Solidarności, zdecydowałem się przerwać milczenie i wyjawić wszystkie okoliczności rozpoczętej od początku stanu wojennego współpracy ze Służbą Bezpieczeństwa. Zostałem poddany szantażowi i groźbom, mającym nakłonić mnie do podpisania współpracy ze Służbą Bezpieczeństwa. Mówili: zginiesz, bydlaku, w kryminale, a twoja rodzina zdechnie z głodu. I wtedy zrobiłem to, co najgorsze. Czułem się zgnojony i byłem tak przerażony, że myślałem już tylko o samobójstwie. Przepraszam. Prowadzili mnie więc jak psa na łańcuchu, a ja nie miałem ani odwagi, ani siły z tym zerwać. Dziś mam już za sobą najtrudniejsze rozmowy z moimi najbliższymi. Ich gotowość wybaczenia mi wyrządzonych im kiedyś krzywd napawa mnie nadzieją. Proszę Boga, aby pozwolił mi uzyskać także wasze wybaczenie.
Ja się nie dziwię takim ludziom jak Filosek, którzy poddani właśnie takiemu nękaniu, takiemu maglowi, bojąc się przede wszystkim do swoich najbliższych, zdecydowali się na to, żeby uwolnić się spod tej presji, żeby podpisać cokolwiek i wyjść sobie stąd i mieć już święty spokój. Ale oczywiście życie pokazało, że to był dopiero początek. Że to, co oni uznawali za uwolnienie, to było właśnie zniewolenie. To był ten moment, kiedy bezpieka ich złamała. Ta wielkość zdrady polega na tym, że on zdradził już nie tam Solidarność, bo to duże słowo, ale zdradził taką elementarną przyjaźń. Tą komitywę dobrą, którą mieliśmy pomiędzy ludźmi, czy wobec powyższego należało nienawidzić, pogardzać i traktować go jak zapowietrzonego. Przecież on jest człowiekiem, mimo wszystko pozostaje człowiekiem. Bo on nawet przecież pomnik postawił tym ludziom, którzy byli wierni, którzy się nie złamali.
I ja cierpię do dzisiaj. Wszystko mam to w pamięci. Koledzy mi wybaczyli. Wszyscy. Ale mnie to boli. No ale cóż.
Ja mojego syna miałam późno. Bardzo go kocham. Nie wiem, czy ta ogromna miłość mojego ojca wpłynęła również na moją postawę, na mój sposób patrzenia na syna.
Myślę o takim człowieku, z którym mogę normalnie rozmawiać. Prowadzi właśnie taki zakład dorabiania kluczy. Widzę go codziennie i jako jedyny mówi mi dzień dobry. A tamci, jak byli bandytami, tak są bandytami. Jest pan osobą, która reprezentowała w jakiś tam sposób tą drugą stronę. A obaj wyszliśmy na tym, jak widać, prawda? Pan, żeby żyć, musi dorabiać. Każdy ma rodzinę. Nie miał pan takich zleceń, żeby na przykład Solidarność obserwować, pisać też
Nie,
to nie.
takie zlecenia to obowiązywały wszystkich, którzy byli tam zatrudnieni w całym tym. Jeżeli ktoś się cokolwiek dowiedział, powinien od razu przekazywać na odpowiednim jednostkom. A tam były wydzielone jednostki, które się tym zajmowały.
Zrobiłby pan jeszcze raz to samo, co pan zrobił przedtem?
To znaczy ja bym został taki, jaki byłem. Nie zmieniłbym się. Nie mam skłonności do krytykowania wszystkiego w czambu. Były rzeczy, które były dobre wtedy i są rzeczy, które są dobre teraz, ale brak tej pracy tutaj, to jest odczuwalny. No. Tu się nie powinno tak wygołocić rynku pracy, no. A on się nawet jeszcze zdeformował. No.
Po wielu latach spotkaliśmy się po jednej stronie barykady, bo tak można powiedzieć, że nas
A teraz już
ta
nas nic,
ściana
a teraz już nas nic nie dzieli
a
prawie,
teraz
że...
już nas niewiele dzieje. No, Znajdujemy się w miejscu po byłej bazie PKS w Żyrardowie, w której zaczęła się Solidarność. PKS zatrudniał wtedy około 400 osób, z placówką w Sochaczewie ponad 600. Tu był wjazd, tak jak teraz stoję, natomiast za mną były 2 budynki administracji, warsztat, stacja obsługi ogromna, no bo autobusy, a z lewej strony stacja paliw. I wstyd mi za to, że do takich, w jakiś tam sensie dołożyliśmy do tego. Nieświadomie, prawda? Zostaliśmy w sposób straszny oszukani.
Ja, syn polskiej ziemi, a zarazem ja, Jan Paweł II papież, wołam wraz z wami wszystkimi: niech zstąpi duch Twój i odnowi oblicze ziemi, tej ziemi.
Przełom we mnie nastąpił w momencie wtedy, kiedy umarł papież Jan Paweł II. Spotkałam się z panem Jerzym Wartakiem, takim naszym przyjacielem rodziny, dobrym duchem. W nim też nastąpiła taka przemiana, aż taka, że postanowiliśmy wystąpić z apelem o pojednanie narodowe.
Nawet najgorszy zbrodniarz ma prawo i może się zreflektować. I my na to liczymy.
Najtrudniejsza sztuka przebaczania nieprzyjaciołom znajduje wzór w Ojcu Świętym. Nie chcemy się poddawać uczuciom zemsty, czytamy w apelu. To przesłanie podpisały także 3 córki zastrzelonych górników.
Powstało to przesłanie właśnie, żeby te nauki Ojca Świętego poszły w świat, właśnie taka prośba o pojednanie. Ja po prostu im przebaczyłam i jest mi z tym lżej. A co oni z tym zrobią, jak oni to odbierają, to już oni tylko wiedzą i Pan Bóg to wie. I kiedyś ich z tego rozliczy. Ale ja dla siebie samej po prostu jest mi lżej. Jest mi lżej i też dla mojego syna. Też dla młodzieży. Dlaczego oni mają w życie wchodzić obciążeni naszymi problemami, naszymi podziałami, naszym bagażem doświadczeń? To jest ich życie i też powinno być zupełnie inaczej. A ktoś musiał dać przykład.
Wróciłem rano z Gdańska, pielgrzymki Ojca Świętego Jana Pawła II do Polski na Zaspie. Przepiękna msza, zbudowany, silny. Rano gorąco, okno otwarte, mieszkaliśmy na parterze. Weszło ich razem 8. I mnie za ręce i za nogi, no to ja w krzyk, że nie, że nawet nie ma mowy, żebym wyszedł. Bo jestem zresztą sam z synkiem, no to nie ma problemu, do domu dziecka go zabierzemy. Mój Paweł miał 4 lata wtedy, skoczył mi na szyję. No coś nieprawdopodobnego. On płakał później, jak się okazało, cały dzień, całą noc, do następnego dnia, tak mniej więcej do południa, szlochał. I ten moment zadecydował, jak później rozmawiałem z lekarzami, o jego właśnie stanie psychicznym, o jego tym lęku. Przytrzymasz to? Naprawdę jest to moja zasługa dosłownie, że takiego mam syna.
O, ostrzeżenie jest tatuś na zapalarce.
No bo to gaz jest, to może się zapalić po prostu. Tu mówisz, żeby postawić?
Tutaj, koło tej białej. Koło tej małej. O, tu.
Tu?
No.
I co dalej? Bo to jest, my poumieramy, prawda? A co z takimi ludźmi, którzy będą potrzebowali opieki, pomocy całodobowej? Przeżegnaj się. Nie wybaczę za swojego syna nigdy, dlatego że to, co ja zrobiłem, ja odpowiadam za to, ale dziecku zrobili ogromną krzywdę, a dziecko było niewinne w tym. Nie wybaczę nigdy. Za swojego synka.
Niech Cię dobry los obdarzy wszystkim, o czym tylko marzysz. Dziękuję za troskę, Panie Staszku, za troskę o nasze zdrowie i nasze dobro, za zaufanie we wszystkim, co robimy, za poświęcenie i trud, za kierowanie się tym, co najcenniejsze, swoim sercem. Dla Pana Stanisława Filoska za ogromne zaangażowanie, za okazane serce i pomoc materialną. Będziemy ciągle i mile wspominać Pana. Dziękujemy za cierpliwość, wyrozumiałość i opiekę. Darowizna na cele statutowe Towarzystwa Solidarnej Pomocy 200 zł. Dziękujemy Panu za pomoc, dziękujemy za wyrozumiałość i opiekę. Podziękowanie dla Pana Stanisława Filoska.
said to Carol after the film ended that I have no words. But this is an academic environment in which we almost need words to find our communion. Might be easier. Does anyone have something to say now, or would you maybe help us think, talk, any reactions?
I guess my question is, we saw the confession of the man who had collaborated with the secret police, but I didn't see any kind of reconciliation or confessions by people who were part of the actual government structure. I mean, had that occurred, I mean, there have been examples in other parts of the world, in South Africa and other places where the actual perpetrators of these kinds of human rights abuses have, you know, given testimony before a truth commission or been convicted of a crime and maybe had confessed in that context. But here, the only confession we saw was from someone who'd been pressured, who was actually on the Solidarity side. And then we saw the man who did the keys, and, you know, maybe he wasn't a huge, important functionary, he was just a lower down guy, it seemed like to me, from the, and he didn't seem particularly repentant at all. He just sort of said, well, this is what I did. So I was wondering if that didn't happen or if it's just not part of the film.
Well, it didn't happen.
The short answer. Is there any movement to make that happen? I mean, this is a very powerful, you know, kind of testimony, it seems, to the need for that kind of, whether it's a truth commission or something like that.
Do you know that?
So, this is a paradox of Polish history, that we had the biggest anti-communist movement that was so strong that communists had to accommodate. They couldn't crush it in the end, that movement. So there was a round table afterwards. So there was a kind of reconciliation without justice. There was mercy without justice after 1989. And communists traded their political power for economic power. Although not all, as you saw, and then there's another possibility of building solidarity because they are poor. That's a different point. And the paradox is that those who are who feel guilty, they are secret service collaborators. As you say, that they are pressured by their friends who know that they spied on them from the secret service archives, because there are many secret service archives, and you can see who spied on you. But those actually really who were responsible, they said, well, I'm sorry, you know, something like that, but it is very formulaic. There's no true reconciliation that touches your heart, touches your emotions. So it's just like, you know, we are sorry, something like that. But there's no process and no transformation, I would say no conversion. And you see that conversion and that secret service collaborator. But this is only, I would say, out of almost 100,000 secret service collaborators, this is the only case we were able to find of a public apology. There were more private apologies among friends or on the, say, in the press, but not a press conference. And that was a press conference. And this is also a very rare case. So people do not feel sorry for what they did. And we hope also, this is why we didn't show that film also in Poland, because we want to find and we want to show it in a good context, so that might be a public debate around it in Poland that won't be immediately politicized. So we also wanted to keep it low, although, for example, that girl who lost her father, she had a kind of reconciliation with the daughter of General Jaruzelski, who was the leader of the communist regime. So they met together and they cried because one father was killed and the other was always absent, and he was the killer. So they reconciled. But we didn't want also to include it in that story, so to make it like as low, as bottom up as possible, without a bigger picture.
Maybe one more sentence. till 1989, one of the fundamental words in anti-communistic movement was truth. After 1989, truth, what Paweł Śpiewak is describing in his book After Communism, I guess, the truth was moved for reconciliation and mercy. And those who were looking for a truth, they were treated, I think, more like radicals. The people who would like to destroy this very delicate agreement. And that was not easy, of course. But the problem is, and I remember the morning, I think I was 23, when I read in the largest Polish newspaper an interview with one of the democratic movement, Adam Michnik, and in that interview he called Czesław Kiszczak as a man of honor, who was the who was the creator of a secret police state. And in the same newspaper there was an article about Jerzy Popiełuszko, who was the victim of Czesław Kiszczak's system, and he's also man of honor. So you know, it's okay. This is very delicate thing because it's politics. It's today thing, of course. But I was really moved. And I called to my friend. What is going on? Tell me, please, what is going on? So who is the man of honor, indeed? So that was the things of a young man, and what now? This is the question that we have also in our mind, and of course for us it's easy to judge as a younger man and after those years. But for a political community, this is a big question: who was wrong or who was right, and how to be a good man after things that you did. So thanks.
I guess I confess to being a little confused by the film, and particularly by the title, The Treasure of Solidarity, because I'm not sure I see much treasure. There's a man who confesses, a woman who forgives, a man who can't forgive, and the only thing that seems to unite them is the sense that, you know, defeat was snatched from the jaws of victory. And I'm wondering where's the treasure in that?
Okay, so the Treasure of Solidarity. The Treasure of Solidarity is not a title; it's a project. The title is The Father, the Son, and a Friend: Forgiveness after Solidarity. So the main theme of the movie is forgiveness, and that's why. And you read it well. So you have those three people, and what unites them is forgiveness in their lives. One man cannot forgive, another wants to be forgiven, and the girl who forgives. So our mistake is that our project is more pronounced than our title.
But in fact, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
That it's exactly the title of the project, that we are searching somehow for the treasure of solidarity, because we knew it existed. We knew that something has happened, but we as the younger generation, we have no contact with it at all. So we are still like looking for this treasure, and like maybe somehow getting prepared to start from the bottom once more, to the discussion about what we had.
No, I think I wouldn't agree, really, because I think it showed somehow the treasure of solidarity, because you cannot impose solidarity on anyone. It's just a decision which you make in your heart, in your mind, in your conscience. It's a personal decision. The solidarity was a personal decision of 10 million people in Poland, and so forgiveness it's a personal decision. You cannot impose forgiveness on anyone. It's what Michnik wrote to this general, that he wrote about conscience. It was a personal decision if you do evil or if you do good, if you're solidar or not. And it is a personal decision if you forgive or not. It's the same work to be done, to After 1990, we tried to build solidarity in Poland, and one of the guy, he was a priest, a Tischner, who played a great formative role for solidarity. He wrote, "It's impossible to imply solidarity in government or in political order. It's always a decision of every human being. It's decision of your heart if you practice solidarity or not. It's not the case of politics, it's the case of your conscience. And so is the forgiveness. It's a case of every human being. And here we saw it is possible, but still it's not easy. And so was the solidarity. It wasn't easy, as the forgiveness isn't easy now."
Maybe something more about the treasure of solidarity. It's really important because I guess Poland right now is a country of individual strategy of success. Okay, after our let's say difficult history in the last 50 years, where many people just lost everything, I mean material and unmaterial, we are the country with a big effort for individual success, and our generation knows that it's not enough. It's not enough to make a community. Of course, this is not the situation as bad as I described it to you. We have many examples of wonderful initiatives. But maybe in thinking more political thinking, in thinking about some structure of capitalism in Poland, we need some third dimension or some deeper dimension and more solidarity thinking than individual. So, but how to organize it for authentic process? This is I think more attitude of people than decision of politics. Of course, the best solution is to put it together, and we would like to work on it and to have some contact with politicians and also with ordinary people. So what would be your advice? How to put together individual strategy of success and real solidarity?
I could say one thing while others might think of their additional comments. One of the things that so moved me and impressed me when I saw this team present in Brussels, they presented to the people who could say that they own Solidarity, because they were the ones who founded Solidarity or who were leaders in Solidarity. And I would watch the people closer to my age than to their age look at this generation and say, no, that's, you're missing what we were. But it's not always those who live in the moment that know the significance, the historical significance of what was. In fact, the people with whom our colleagues will speak tomorrow in my Knowledge Networks and Global Transformations class just read a book by Bill Sewell in which he talks about the meaning of an event. The meaning of the event doesn't take place in the moment of the event. It takes place in subsequent interpretations of the meaning of that event. When the Bastille was stormed, it wasn't immediately recognized that the public was taking and making democracy. That was subsequently understood. And so I wonder sometimes, when I read this work, when I listen to this discussion, whether the meaning of solidarity itself is being reconstructed and remade and in fact considered more deeply than what one can enact in the moment of transformation, especially when there's a cross-generational dialogue as you are helping to generate. Easier outside of Poland, perhaps, than within Poland right now.
I'm
Or
going to ask this
Zelensky.
question. Yes, but how did you find these people, the solidarity, the people, your interviewees, and people who were involved in the solidarity movement?
It was Michael's idea.
So, but you mean in general or for that film?
For the film.
For the film, it was, I don't know actually, because it's all were just by accident. So I shot another documentary film some years ago to commemorate 20th years anniversary of New Poland, of democratic Poland, and then we found that man who had his mentally ill son. So I knew that that's the case, but at that time it was not possible to even talk with him about his son. So that's, but then after 5 years when we came back and we had to, Carl and I, we had 100 hours of footage for that film. So we were traveling all over Poland, and we had the final scenes already imagined, what they should look like. And also with that guy, because he guarded us against, so we couldn't have a shot of his son. But finally, he decided also to share that story with us. The other was the only case of public apology, so I just remembered it from dimly from the press that something like that happened. And incredibly, because there was no footage of that in TV, and incredibly, I had a friend who wanted to make a documentary movie, so the whole footage of his confession is taken from my friend who didn't finish his documentary film. So that was incredible because it just makes that film, that confession. And also the third woman, actually we didn't want to take her. We decided for first that guy who is showing her the mine, the guy who lost his friend. But then we just saw that she's much better because he was so traumatized that he told the story of the past as if it was some distant story, not emotionally. So he was just laughing. It was strange for us, but we felt that there was a big trauma in that guy that couldn't be actually, and he couldn't tell it in a way that would be that would speak to you. So then we decided to switch it for a woman. But he speaks in a brilliant way, but not emotionally. And I've seen also a film on Uganda that was an inspiration for me, for us, that people are so traumatized that they cannot come back to those times with emotions. So they are even more emotional by being like death, completely. But there's what he said, and he also referred to the fact that John Paul II died. Something snapped in me then. I burst into tears like a small boy who has had his father taken away and doesn't know what to do. But then I thought to myself, don't sob, silly. The Lord didn't take the Holy Father away from us. He gave him to us. And those 9 young men who were killed by the ZOMO, that is paramilitary riot police, were given to us by the Lord as well, not taken away. Then for the first time I thought of the ZOMO in categories other than as murderers. John Paul II's will was read out on television. I thought to myself, am I writing my will? When St. Peter asks me, what did you do, my son on earth? What will I reply? That I earned a salary? That I was imprisoned for the sake of freedom? That's not enough. So that was our initial hero, but then we decided for that one. To take a documentary film, it's a long story. Just yes.
I'm wondering what role does religion or the church have in your movement? Is it supportive, or is it some aspect of it? You make references to Pope and so forth, but not clear.
But you mean to our project or to
your
the
project.
solidarity?
Your project.
Actually, could you explain both also to because I don't really understand
So you don't understand our project and you don't understand Solidarity.
See, you did it, idea.
So the place of religion, that's the point. So in Solidarity, it was a major importance, religion. And just to reduce it, I worked as a sociologist in a contentious paradigm, Charles Tilly's paradigm. And I analyzed religion as a mobilizing ideology, and you can analyze religion as mobilizing force, and it mobilized millions of people. So their instrument, as Tilly would put it, repertoire of their mobilization were masses that were held daily, that gave them reassurance, and even for atheists, to be sure, that they could reflect on what they are doing, and they gave them reassurance. It gave them calm, and also the symbols, religious symbols are transformative symbols. They make you change, and then it's also important for me, the transformations in our heroes, whether they do transform or not. And the one who is the most Catholic, all of them, he doesn't change in his life. So the guy who has that mentally sick son. So he cannot change, and he says at one point that I cannot forgive from a human perspective, not a Catholic one. So that's whereas those two who are not very religious, they discovered that religious symbolism is also a way of conversion. It's a little bit like, to give maybe to Brute an example, like, a little bit like in alcoholics. To build your subjectivity, they refer to the transcendence. So this is, and that was a transformative power on the one hand. And speaking of our project, although we are from the Center for the Thought of John Paul II, we didn't want actually to make some religious movie. We just wanted to have 3 cases, and for us, that was discovery also, that it played such a important role in all those cases. The question of God, the question of transcendence, forgiveness. So that's and we had also, people in our project were believers and non-believers. So that's yes.
What's important, the center is a public institution, so it's not for
we are secular.
religious
We are Poland is an interesting country that is secular institution. So the Center for the Thought of John Paul II is a secular institution.
Okay.
So we have that wall of separation between state and religion.
Which, they are I have become the ultimate Rhode Island patriot, because I've been talking about Roger Williams to every Polish visitor that is here. Could I just say something about the religion aspect to it? Because, one of the things that so many people think is simple is the relationship of religion to the Solidarity movement, and it's not at all simple. It's absolutely central, but to think about the way in which it is central is in fact much more complex than imagining the big pen of Pope John Paul II that was used to sign the Solidarity Agreement. And I would use this particular illustration to show why it would be worthwhile you're continuing to study this, because I would like to learn from you. And here is my, Czy pani mówi, czyta po polsku?
No, but I understand. I understand some.
Tak, myślałam. I thought, because I asked this lady if she spoke Polish. And there's a beautiful book for me, at least, called Między Panem a Plebanem. And it's a dialogue between Adam Michnik and Józef Tischner, if I remember correctly, with Jacek Żukowski, the great editor and journalist, as being the facilitator. And it's this dialogue going back between Michnik, who's been mentioned many times and who was in fact here last year, who is one of the heroes of the Solidarity movement, who is himself a secular person, who is himself invited to masses, not because he was Catholic, but because this was a way in which people were invited to be together. And he has this dialogue with Tischner, who was often called the theologian of Solidarity. And they have an exchange in which they talk about 2 gifts that Poland has given the world in the 20th century. I'm curious whether you know. Because it's controversial. No, it's controversial. The first obvious gift is solidarity. The second non-obvious gift, because many people in Poland say that this was zdrada, this was betrayal, was the Round Table negotiations of 1989. Tischner and Michnik concluded that this was an expression of religiosity in the sense that it enabled a transformation of Poland nonviolently. We already spoke here of how this was enabled, perhaps, by a deal where communists traded in political capital for economic capital. But one of the things that I found when we organized a conference on the Round Table at the University of Michigan in 1999, I was identified at that time as Michnik's stooge, because we would actually have a conference on the Round Table. And they called me a stooge only until I could produce the letter from John Paul II that said, "We applaud your attempt to understand how peaceful change is possible." It's not the exact quote. You can go to Cultural Formations and Post-Communism. The last chapter I had the exact quote. So here again, the complexity of religion's relationship to political change is illustrated, I think, not by who has the authority to say what is, but by the value of dialogue around what ought to be. And that's why I take inspiration from this group.
And one more thing, that we deliberately have chosen as the heroes here, people from the left. So Adam Michnik, Jacek Kuroń, and Leszek Kołakowski, who lectured at Chicago University Committee for Social Thought, to show that they rediscovered the very similar language that was also at that very time rediscovered by Catholics. So that was an incredible merger of those two narratives, and people searching for the same words. And when they just got together, their impact on society was much greater than if they were just fighting alone. So that it's also incredible for me to see the spiritualization. How this is the way I call it: spiritualization of the left. That the left stopped thinking only in terms about the world in terms of, say, material interests, but also about conscience, about community, dignity, and then they just could unite and in such a forceful, dialogical way transform Poland.
Can I make one very friendly suggestion boldly about the movie, which is just that if you feel like there's any opportunity to, I don't know if you feel it's completed or if there's a chance to edit it in any fashion, I guess I would urge you, based on some of the reactions we've had here and even my own reaction, to fill in a little bit of the gaps of what's going on in the larger frame of solidarity, especially, but not only, I think, for kind of an international audience, just because some of what you've just provided here in the talk, just very basic things. Who was John Paul II? What was solidarity? What are we? I mean, very, very basic elements that you could fill in with just some narration and a few maybe news clips from the time and things like that to provide some context for the very beautiful stories that you have, I think could make the movie a little bit more accessible to those who don't already know that history, which is going to be a lot of people, actually.
Thanks.
There is also one thing which I remember about this movie, because we spoke with this guy who was present there, with this guy with mustaches, who was with this lady in Wujek called Kolmai, because he told us the best solidarity expression I ever had, because he was a coal miner, and he said, if you're a coal miner, even if you hate your colleague, but then you go underground to work there, and it's clear for you, whatever happens, is there any danger or threat for his health or life, you will do everything to sacrifice and to help him, even if you hate him. And it was the case, it was naturally understood there by coal miners. And in those situations present there, one of a coal miner was imprisoned, and the others did the same what they did underground. They just took, they supported him as they did underground, so they did also to a guy who was imprisoned. It is how they understood this. There was no great idea under this. It was just common practice. And it also depicts a tremendous tragedy that happens, that they did what they did every day, and the coal miners said we should, yes, because they practice solidarity. Not great ideas, but something natural for them. So.
Can I have a question? I know I'm from Poland, so maybe I shouldn't ask the question, but I'm really interested, especially when I'm listening to you and I'm discovering new elements of solidarity, and it's really interesting to discover it. When you try to describe the mechanism, it's really fascinating. And then you've decided in movie to focus on one topic, and it's forgiveness. And for me, it's something, you know, it's narrowing the topic, which is so fruitful. So please explain to me why this topic is the theme of your movie, which for me it was very moving. I understand everything, so I was crying. I was very into the movie, but I don't understand why this one topic is the theme of this picture.
So actually, it comes to your question: where's the treasure of solidarity? Actually, when we are applying for a grant, the theme was the lost treasure of solidarity. But then I was told, you know, it's too pessimistic, too Polish, you know. So then we changed, you know, for treasure of solidarity. So in our book, we are describing 6 steps of solidarity. They were more or less told here about facing reality, so seeing that there's evil that has to be overcome, and that evil just pertains to you. There's your responsibility for that evil. So this is the first step, to face reality. They had that beautiful expression that Polish society was narcotized at that time. There was analgesia, and you know there were no narcotics at that time, although there was lots of vodka. But they didn't drink during solidarity strikes. They wanted to be aware of what's going on. So this is the first step. The second is to see that there's greater good, and you can attach your hope to the greater good. So there's ethos, there's dignity, there's common good. So they imagine that greater good using such words. The third step is the step that that greater good has to become part of your heart. So you have to become courageous, moderate at the same time. You have to have faith, you have to have hope, you have to have charity. So we are giving 7 habits of highly effective people, but these are a little bit different habits that pertains to solidarity. And then finally there is action, and they were all about action. So the most important book of John Paul II, former Karol Wojtyła, was The Acting Person. And people of the left, like Jacek Kuroń, they were all about action, what we have to do. So this is a very Lenin-like question, what shall be done? And these are 4 steps of solidarity. When you are seeing the good, when you incorporate virtues and then you act, then there's a moral community built around you. But there are those who are passerbys, who are not part of the community. So what you can do, if they are on a par with you, you can dialogue with them. And this is the 5th element. You can be in dialogue with those people. But what if they are stronger than you, or that they treat you instrumentally, or you cannot do anything with them? So dialogue is not enough. And the 6th step is forgiveness. So this is the only thing you can do when there are people who are more powerful than you, and they don't want you to make solidarity movement. They are against you. So the only thing you can do is forgiveness. And therefore, we took that theme of forgiveness, that this is the last thing we can do. And this is it's not probably nobody would share that view. But I would say that what we have now from Solidarity is forgiveness. And the theme of forgiveness and humanity of those people who try to forgive or they try to come to terms with forgiveness. And then they come back to the notions, to those steps.
But
So
Michał,
if
you want to
you-
say that they are helpless? I mean, they are not subjects? I mean, they are kind of, you know...
No, they are moral subjects. But this is
But
this
if
is the
you-
power. This is the power of the powerless. This is really, and I would say, this is even greater power, as you have as the powerless than you know the state power. And we also put in our book that people who were in prison, they could feel free, because they could forgive, or they were still active. So this is also a very important theme of that book, that you can be active and you are always moral subject. And I would say even more that even those who are powerless are precisely, they have the biggest power of transformation. And Havel understood it very well, and St. Paul as well, that our strength can be in our weakness.
And it's also, that's my own opinion, that also struck me very much yesterday when I read Tishner one more time, is that solidarity begins with your decision. We talk about this refugee problem in Poland and why Poland's a solidar country doesn't take any steps like government steps towards refugees. But it's very clearly written that solidarity begins within every human heart, conscience. It's not the state power, it's a human power. You cannot imply solidarity on anyone. It's your own decision towards a person, towards a human. It's your own response towards evil, towards suffering. It's something what transforms you, what happens in you. And I think it's the same with forgiveness. You cannot imply forgiveness on anyone. It's also your decision if you forgive. As same difficult or even more difficult. And what I thought maybe that's controversial, but Mr. Popielczyk is now communist because he has a problem to forgive, and it's a problem of this decision of heart to forgive, so it's changed. The situation changed somehow. But it's I don't know,
One
if
of
you
the
agree.
things I have learned from this group is the power and importance of dialogue.
I've seen several times.
I kept on,
something-
yeah. You
I
kept
mean,
on. I mean,
it's a half question.
Jennifer is like you telegraph that you want to. You're
No
thinking
poker
it
face.
through, but you're not.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking many things, and the most organized of which I guess is that I was struck by what Michael said about how there was at least you observed a moment of difference, right? Where people who were there were like kind of like wanting to resist on the way things are going, and it's true because the meaning of things can change over time, and they change for people who was there and people who are seeing it later, and I think that that's very, very important to track. Because that's just how the world works, otherwise we're tracking fantasy. But I've heard several times throughout this presentation, which I want to compliment you on, this has been wonderful and your work is really great, but I've heard a few times this word, and the word is natural, right? I think that there is no bigger red flag for a moment of cultural value or cultural narrative that is going unexamined than when we refer to something as natural. And natural can be an experience, right? You can say like, my gosh, he was just such a natural at the guitar, or we fell in love and it was so natural, right? Natural can be an experience, but it's never reality. It's always something that we have created. And so I've heard talk of like solidarity being a thing that naturally arose, or about natural moral categories and what felt good and what. And I would just encourage you to take those moments where either your interpretation of what happened as someone who's an expert in your culture and your history, or when you hear that coming out of the voices of people who participated in solidarity, to dig deeper and say what exactly about this made these things feel so natural, because I think that's very, very rarely the case, and those are the things that the kind of expertise you have is required to get to the bottom of. I can't do that certainly, but you could.
Yeah, well, if I don't like that word natural at all, But if I were to use some word that would apply to solidarity, it would be supernatural.
Yeah, he is one of the cleverest fellows I know in sociology. He's so adept. And so, but one of the things I think about solidarity is that, you know, it is rarely so punctual as Americans like to be. And secondly, that dialogue is really critical, and we have a way to facilitate dialogue right beyond these doors. And thirdly, I suspect that even though there are more Poles in this room than there are typically, there is probably more thirst for learning about Polish approaches to social change than there has been for some time. And we have, fortunately, another opportunity this week on October 1st at noon. Maria Szymborska, Marisha Rogachevska, and Alexandra Godis are speaking at the Taubman Center for Public Policy on the subject of meeting the need for a new kind of relationship between policymakers and academia, with one of their themes being solidary knowledge. Do I have that right?
Yes, but it's about empowerment and not helplessness, because we are much more into that.
So you can see that the dialogue is anticipated already today. So if I could ask you all to join me in thanking so much our panelists and all of you.